Hey guys, tonight we start with a breath. A deep inhale as you settle into this moment. Your body heavy, but your mind still restless like a squirrel on espresso. You probably won't survive this without wrestling a little with the wild truth that life is exactly what it is, whether you like it or not. But here's the invitation: when you accept, life becomes easier. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're tuning in from as we ease into tonight's journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into acceptance, not the fake. I'm fine kind that hides turmoil, but the deep, honest embrace of reality as it is. This moment, with all its mess and magic, you meet it head on. Buddhists call this suchness, the pure essence of things beyond judgment. Historically, Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, first saw the world's harsh truths during his foresight's aging, sickness, death, and renunciation. These realities cracked his sheltered life wide open and sparked his quest for liberation. Historians still argue whether these stories were literal events or symbolic teachings, but their power endures. And here's a quirky tidbit: some Buddhist monks would meditate while sitting on beds of nails, talk about embracing reality literally. You notice acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's a bold, active stance that says, this is what is. You stop battling the present and start flowing with it, like water finding its path downstream instead of smashing against rocks. Tonight, as you breathe, invite yourself to step fully into what is the discomfort, the calm, the unknown. Acceptance begins here. You feel the weight of resistance, that stubborn grip you keep tightening against what's unfolding around you. This resistance fuels your suffering, making everything heavier than it needs to be. When you stop fighting reality, the burden eases. Think about the story of Siddhartha's awakening beneath the Bodhi tree. He realized that suffering arises from craving and resistance to life's truths. Historians still argue whether the Buddha's enlightenment was a sudden flash or gradual insight. A quirky note: some meditative practices in his time involved breath control that almost looked like yoga, but were more about mastering the mind than physical flexibility. You begin to see how clinging to how things should be traps you in a cycle of pain. Wanting life to be different than it is creates frustration, disappointment, and anxiety. But when you welcome things as they are, even the unpleasant bits, you dissolve that suffering. This isn't about liking hardship, but acknowledging its presence without adding extra layers of judgment. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack. Resistance is like adding more stones. Acceptance is putting the pack down, even if only briefly. In your daily life, you might notice this resistance in arguments, stress at work, or self-criticism. When you catch yourself resisting, pause and invite acceptance instead. It's not giving up, it's giving yourself peace. Tonight, notice where you resist and gently practice letting go. The easier path awaits. You feel the tight grip of expectation squeezing your chest. Don't you those rigid outcomes you cling to, like life rafts in a storm, hoping they'll keep you afloat? But here's the secret: letting go of expectations frees you from the relentless waves of disappointment. Look back at the ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, who taught that we should focus on what's within our control and accept what isn't. Historians still argue whether Stoicism was purely a philosophy of endurance or an early form of cognitive therapy. A quirky bit: Marcus Aurelius supposedly kept a personal journal where he reminded himself not to get too attached to praise or blame, like a 2,000-year-old self-help book. You start to realize that expectations are often the architects of your suffering. When you imagine a perfect outcome and reality doesn't match, frustration follows. But when you loosen your grip and embrace uncertainty, you invite flexibility and peace. This isn't about lowering standards or becoming indifferent. It's about releasing the need to control the future while still engaging fully in the present. Like a gardener planting seeds without obsessing over exactly when they'll sprout, you nurture and trust the process. In everyday moments, whether a relationship, a project, or your own progress, observe your expectations. Notice how they shape your emotions and gently practice stepping back. Tonight, breathe into the space where expectations dissolve and life feels lighter. You watch as life slips through your fingers like sand always changing, never quite holding still. Embracing impermanence means accepting that nothing lasts forever, and this acceptance lightens your burdens more than you might expect. Think of the cherry blossoms in Japan, celebrated for their fleeting beauty. They bloom spectacularly, but only for a short time, reminding everyone that life's moments are precious because they don't last. Historians still argue whether the cherry blossom festivals began as religious rituals or seasonal celebrations. On a quirky note, some samurai practiced hanami picnics under the blossoms as a meditation on life's transient nature. Party and philosophy combined, you begin to see how resisting change is like trying to freeze a flowing river. It's futile and exhausting. When you accept impermanence, you open to life's flow and find peace amid uncertainty. This doesn't mean you become passive or detached, but that you cherish each moment for what it is, knowing it's unique and temporary. Like savoring the last bite of your favorite dessert before it's gone, you appreciate life's experiences more deeply. Tonight, as you breathe, invite the awareness of impermanence to soften your grip. Let the river of life carry you gently forward. You wrestle with control, don't you? That urge to hold tightly onto the reins of your life, convinced that if you just grip harder, everything will fall into place. But here's the paradox. True agency comes when you release your need to control every outcome. Consider the philosophy of the Tao Te Ching, where Laozi teaches that yielding is often stronger than resistance. Historians still argue whether Laozi was a single historical figure or a collection of wisdom from various sages. A quirky note, Taoist practitioners sometimes engage in wu-wei, or effortless action, which sounds like laziness, but is actually skillful flow with life's rhythms. You begin to notice how clinging to control creates tension and frustration. When you let go, you open space for creativity, flexibility, and unexpected opportunities. It's like steering a sailboat. You adjust the sails to the wind rather than fighting against it. In daily life, this might mean releasing the grip on plans that don't pan out, or accepting people as they are without trying to change them. It doesn't mean surrendering responsibility, but choosing where to invest your energy wisely. Tonight, breathe deeply and practice loosening your hold. Notice how releasing control brings a surprising sense of freedom. You begin to see acceptance and compassion as two sides of the same coin. When you accept yourself fully, flaws, and all, you open the door to genuine kindness toward yourself and others. This compassion becomes a healing balm, easing old wounds and fostering connection. Think of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. In Mahayana Buddhism, who embodies infinite mercy, statues of this figure with multiple arms symbolize the ability to help many beings at once. Historians still argue whether this deity evolved from Indian deities or is a uniquely Buddhist figure. A quirky tidbit in some cultures, Avalokiteshvara is believed to reincarnate as the Dalai Lama, blending myth and history. You realize that harsh self-judgment blocks growth, but acceptance softens that barrier. When you greet your imperfections with kindness, they lose power to derail you. Similarly, when you extend this compassion to others, conflicts soften and relationships deepen. In your daily routine, try to catch moments when criticism arises and consciously replace it with understanding. This practice not only transforms your inner world, but radiates outward, creating a ripple effect of empathy. Tonight, as you settle into stillness, invite compassion to fill the spaces left by judgment. Feel how acceptance blooms into kindness, healing you from within. You root yourself in mindful awareness, simply noticing whatever arises. Thoughts, feelings, sensations without resistance or judgment. This open, accepting attention transforms your relationship to experience, making life feel more spacious and less tangled. Recall the Vipassana meditation, practiced by the Buddha, where direct observation of phenomena without attachment leads to insight. Historians still argue whether Vipassana evolved as a formal practice early on or developed later as a distinct school. Here's a quirky detail: some Vipassana practitioners use noble silence retreats, avoiding all communication for days, like an intense digital detox centuries before smartphones. You see how acceptance through mindfulness doesn't mean passivity. It's a clear, alert presence that lets you respond wisely instead of reacting impulsively. When anxiety or sadness arises, instead of pushing it away or gripping it tightly, you simply observe, letting it pass, like clouds across the sky. In everyday life, this might be as simple as noticing the taste of your food, the sound of rain, or the feeling of your breath. These moments anchor you, dissolving overwhelm and inviting calm. Tonight, settle into the rhythm of your breath and welcome whatever is here now. Acceptance through mindfulness is your steady anchor in a shifting world. You cultivate patience, that quiet endurance born from deep acceptance. Patience isn't just waiting, it's an active practice of trusting the unfolding of life without resistance or frustration. Recall the monks in the Theravada tradition who spend years perfecting their meditation practice, often in isolated monasteries. Historians still argue whether the early disciples of the Buddha understood patience primarily as a mental discipline or as a moral virtue. A quirky fact: some monks in Southeast Asia practice forest meditation, spending months alone in the jungle, embodying patience in its most literal form. You see how impatience often arises when you want things to move faster or be different, causing unnecessary suffering. But patience grounds you in acceptance, allowing you to move forward steadily without anxiety. In daily life, patience might look like breathing through frustrating moments, giving others space to grow, or accepting delays without complaint. This steady acceptance transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth. Tonight, invite patience to settle in your heart. Feel it as a calm river flowing through your being, carrying you gently toward ease. You face your fears not by running from them, but by accepting them fully. When fear arises, instead of fighting it, you make room for it, acknowledging its presence without allowing it to dominate your life. Think of the ancient warriors who faced battle with both courage and acceptance of their mortality. Historians still argue whether the Stoic approach to fear was purely philosophical or tied to practical survival tactics. On a quirky note, some warriors, like the Vikings, believed that dying in battle would lead to a glorious afterlife in Valhalla, which added an interesting layer to their acceptance of death as a part of their life. You realize that when you meet fear with acceptance, it loses its power over you. Instead of avoiding difficult situations or moments of uncertainty, you face them with a quiet, open heart. Fear doesn't go away, but it becomes something you can live with, something that doesn't control you. In your daily life, this means embracing uncomfortable moments instead of shrinking away from them. Maybe it's a difficult conversation or a new challenge at work. You walk into those situations not with dread, but with the calm understanding that fear is just another feeling to accept. Tonight, when fear arises, breathe deeply and welcome it as a teacher rather than a threat. Feel how acceptance turns fear from an obstacle into a doorway. You begin to understand that acceptance is the key to forgiveness, both for others and for yourself. Holding on to grudges or guilt only weighs you down. When you accept the past as it is, you free yourself from its grip. Think of the Buddha's teachings on the concept of karma, where actions, whether good or bad, carry consequences. But the key lies in accepting these consequences without dwelling in resentment. Historians still debate whether karma was a uniquely Buddhist idea or a concept shared by other Indian traditions like Hinduism and Jainism. A quirky fact: some Buddhist monks believe that the key to freeing oneself from bad karma is to practice metta, sending loving kindness to those who have wronged you. It's like sending peace letters to your enemies, whether they ever read them or not. You realize that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior, but rather accepting that it happened and choosing not to carry the emotional burden anymore. Holding on to anger or guilt only poisons your well-being, but accepting the past with compassion allows healing to begin. In your daily life practice, this forgiveness by letting go of grudges, even small ones, whether it's a misunderstanding with a friend or something from years ago, when you let go, you open up space for peace. Tonight, reflect on one thing you're holding on to. What would it feel like to accept it and let it go for your own peace? You surrender to the flow of life, not as an act of defeat, but as a conscious choice to release the resistance that creates turmoil. This surrender isn't about giving up. It's about trusting the natural rhythm that carries you forward. Remember the ancient Taoists who practiced Wu Wei, or effortless action, flowing with the currents rather than swimming against them. Historians still argue whether Wu Wei was a political strategy or spiritual practice. A quirky tidbit: some Taoist sages practiced spontaneous laughter and dance as a form of surrender to life's flow. Imagine that as an ancient stress relief. You begin to see how surrender dissolves tension and invites peace. When you stop forcing outcomes or clinging to expectations, life unfolds more easily. Surrender doesn't mean passivity, but a dynamic engagement with the present moment. In daily life, surrender might look like accepting delays without frustration or embracing changes in plans with openness. You're no longer the rigid tree, but the flexible bamboo bending gracefully with the wind. Tonight, as you breathe, practice this surrender. Feel your body soften, your mind quiet, and your heart open to life's unfolding. You come to see acceptance as freedom, the key that unlocks the prison of resistance you didn't realize you'd built around yourself. When you embrace life as it is, you break the chains of struggle and find liberation in simplicity. Think about the Zen monks who practiced letting go of all attachments to reach enlightenment. Historians still argue whether Zen's sudden enlightenment was an actual experience or a teaching device to inspire practice. On a quirky note, some Zen monks used to shout or throw rocks during meditation sessions to shock students out of attachment. Definitely a wake-up call you didn't expect. You realize that resistance is like carrying heavy baggage on a long journey. When you put down that load through acceptance, your steps become lighter and the path clearer. In everyday moments, acceptance frees you from endless mental battles, accepting your emotions, your circumstances, your limitations. This freedom is not about complacency, but about seeing clearly and acting wisely without being trapped by struggle. Tonight, breathe deeply into the space of acceptance and feel the freedom blooming inside you. You discover that equanimity, the ability to remain steady in both joy and sorrow, comes from deep acceptance. Life's ups and downs no longer throw you off balance. Instead, you navigate them with calm assurance. Consider the Buddhist monks who meditate in the face of intense storms, either literal or metaphorical. They teach that equanimity isn't about escaping pain or avoiding joy, but learning to experience both without being consumed by them. Historians still argue whether this approach was a result of necessity or a conscious choice to train the mind for resilience. A quirky detail: some monks would sit in silence during thunderstorms, using the loud cracks of thunder to test their mental steadiness. Now that's what I call practice. You begin to notice how your attachment to emotions, the highs and the lows, fuels a cycle of internal turbulence. But when you accept both the joy and sorrow that come your way, you see that each emotion, each experience, is just another passing moment in the larger journey of life. Instead of resisting, you start to let them flow through you. In daily life, equanimity shows up when you handle setbacks with grace or allow yourself to savor moments of joy without fear of them ending. You become a steady anchor in a sea of change, unaffected by the waves around you. Tonight, take a deep breath and imagine yourself as a still lake, unmoved by the winds, reflecting the world with clarity and calm. You realize at last that a life built on acceptance is a life of ease and joy. The more you practice welcoming each moment exactly as it is, the more you harvest peace, contentment, and resilience. This is not some far-off ideal, but a tangible experience available to you now. Think of the simple lives of the early Buddhist communities who lived with minimal possessions and deep communal acceptance. Historians still argue whether these early sanghas were as harmonious as texts suggest or marked by human struggles like any community. A quirky fact, some monks wore robes dyed with natural colors from tree bark and roots, a literal embodiment of simplicity and acceptance of nature. You understand that the practice of acceptance is ongoing, never perfect, always growing. Each time you meet life with open arms, you plant seeds that bloom into a garden of ease. The stress of resisting fades, replaced by a steady calm that carries you through challenges and celebrations alike. In daily life, acceptance helps you navigate relationships, work, and your inner world with grace. You become less reactive and more responsive, less burdened and more free. Tonight, breathe deeply and feel the softness that acceptance brings. Let the gentle peace settle in your bones and carry you into restful sleep, knowing that ease is your natural state when you accept life fully.